The sirens were getting closer, and I could hear my husband's voice cracking as he pleaded with the officer standing in our living room. 23 years of marriage, and it had come to this. Police in my home, my hands shaking so badly I couldn't hold the folder of documents I'd been clutching. But let me back up. 3 months earlier, I was still pretending everything was fine. I lived in Phoenix, Arizona, in a modest house we'd bought when the kids were still young. The desert heat had a way of making everything feel slower, heavier. My husband, Mark, worked in commercial real estate, or at least that's what he told me he was doing during those long absences. I was 52 years old, and I'd spent the better part of my adult life making our house a home. The kitchen table where we ate dinner most nights was worn smooth from years of elbows and plates and the weight of conversation. I never imagined it would become the place where my entire world would crack open. It started with small things, a credit card statement that didn't quite add up. Mark saying he'd handle the bills, insisting I shouldn't worry my pretty little head about finances. I know what you're thinking. How could I not see it? But when you love someone, when you've built a life with them, you find ways to explain away the inconsistencies. You tell yourself stories that make sense because the alternative is too terrifying to consider. One Tuesday afternoon, I was cleaning out his car because he'd asked me to take it to get detailed. That's when I found the receipt. It was tucked under the passenger seat, crumpled like someone had tried to throw it away but missed. Dinner for two at a steakhouse downtown. The date was from 2 weeks ago, a night he'd told me he was working late on a big deal. The total was $347. We hadn't been to a restaurant that expensive in over a year because money was supposedly tight. My hands went cold. The Arizona sun was beating down through the windshield, but I felt like I was standing in a freezer. I sat there in that hot car, staring at that piece of paper, and something in my chest just tightened, like someone had reached inside and grabbed hold of my heart. The receipt was from Dominic's Steakhouse, one of those places with dim lighting and leather booths where businessmen close deals and politicians make promises. We'd celebrated our 15th anniversary there, back when things were still good between us. I remembered the taste of the lobster bisque, the weight of Mark's hand covering mine across the table, the way he'd looked at me like I was still the most beautiful woman in the world. Now, he'd taken someone else there, someone worth $347 of our supposedly non-existent money. I looked at the itemization more closely, my hands trembling so badly the paper rattled. 2 filets mignons, a bottle of wine, not just any wine, but a 2015 Caymus Cabernet that cost $120 alone. Chocolate lava cake for dessert. He'd ordered the lava cake. That was my favorite dessert. The one thing I always got when we went somewhere nice. Had he ordered it for her, or had he been thinking of me? The thought made bile rise in my throat. I wanted to storm inside and demand answers right then. Instead, I folded the receipt, put it in my pocket, and finished cleaning the car. Because that's what I did. I swallowed things down. I kept the peace. I vacuumed the floor mats with meticulous care, wiped down the dashboard, cleaned the cup holders where I found 2 coffee cup rings, 2 different sizes, 2 different brands. Even that small detail felt like a betrayal. Everything felt like evidence now. Proof of a life he was living that didn't include me. That night at dinner, I watched him across that kitchen table. He was eating the meatloaf I'd made, scrolling through his phone, barely looking up. 23 years, and I was sitting across from a stranger. I opened my mouth to ask about the receipt, but what came out was, "How was work?" He mumbled something about permits and zoning, still staring at his screen. I nodded like I believed him, like I always believed him. The green beans on my plate had gone cold. I'd cooked them with almonds and garlic, the way he liked them, and he hadn't even noticed. Hadn't complimented the meal, hadn't asked about my day, hadn't looked up from that damn phone for more than 30 seconds. I counted. I actually sat there counting the seconds between glances, like I was conducting some pathetic scientific study of my own irrelevance. "Did you remember to pay the electric bill?" he asked, finally looking up. Not, how are you, or what did you do today, or you look nice. Just a question about a bill, a reminder of domestic duties, a reduction of 23 years of partnership to household management. Yes, I said quietly. I paid it this morning. Good. Can't have the lights going out. That would be embarrassing. He went back to his phone, thumbs moving rapidly across the screen. Texting someone, probably her. Probably the woman who got the $120 wine and the lava cake and the version of my husband who still knew how to be charming. Have you ever felt like you're losing your mind? Like the person you thought you knew has been replaced by someone wearing their face? That's where I was, sitting at my own table, in my own house, feeling like an intruder in my own life. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't announce itself with trumpets and fanfare. It seeps in quietly, like water damage behind the walls. By the time you notice the stain, the structure is already rotting. I started paying attention after that, really paying attention. I noticed he'd changed the password on his phone. When I asked about it casually, he said something about work security. I noticed he'd started doing laundry himself, which he'd never done before. He said he was trying to be more helpful. Every explanation was reasonable on the surface. Every excuse had just enough truth to make me doubt my own suspicions. I also started noticing patterns in his absences. Thursday nights he was always working late. Sunday afternoons he had client meetings. Who has client meetings on Sunday afternoons? But I didn't question it out loud. I just noted it, filed it away in the growing catalog of inconsistencies that I was building in my head. One Thursday evening, I drove past his office building. I told myself I was just running errands, that it was on my way to the grocery store, that I wasn't actually checking up on him. But I was. His car wasn't in the parking lot. At 7:30 on a Thursday night, when he'd told me he'd be working until at least 9, his car wasn't there. I sat in my own car across the street, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white, and I felt something inside me crumble a little more. But I couldn't get that receipt out of my head. $347. For what? For who? The questions gnawed at me, but every time I thought about confronting him, something stopped me. Fear, maybe. Or this pathetic hope that if I didn't say it out loud, it wouldn't be real. Isn't that stupid? Like I could unknow something by pretending I didn't know it. I'd always been the kind of woman who believed in loyalty. My mama raised me to think that marriage was sacred, that you worked through problems, that love meant staying even when it got hard. I'd sacrificed so much for that belief. I'd given up my dreams of being a writer, real writing, not just the grocery lists and birthday cards that made up my literary output these days. When the kids were small, I'd told myself I'd get back to it later. Then later became never. And never became this hollow ache I'd learned to ignore. I still had the notebooks from college, filled with poems and short stories, and the beginnings of a novel I'd been so excited about. They were in a box in the garage, buried under Christmas decorations and old baby clothes I couldn't bring myself to donate. Sometimes late at night, when Mark was snoring beside me, I'd think about those notebooks. I'd remember the girl who wrote them, who believed her words mattered, who had dreams bigger than being someone's wife and mother. I'd mourned that girl quietly, in the dark, where no one could see. Mark's career had always come first. When he wanted to start his own firm, I'd encouraged him, even though it meant tighter budgets and more stress. When he needed to travel for work, I'd managed everything at home alone. I'd been the foundation he built his success on, and I'd never asked for anything in return except honesty and respect. Now it seemed like I hadn't even gotten that. 2 weeks after finding the receipt, I was at my annual checkup. Dr. Patricia Chen had been my physician for over a decade, and she knew me well enough to notice when something was off. She asked about my stress levels while checking my blood pressure, and I must have given something away in my face because she put down her stethoscope and really looked at me. "Janet," she said gently, "your blood pressure is higher than I'd like to see. And you've lost weight since your last visit. Are you eating properly? I opened my mouth to give her the usual reassurances, but what came out instead was the truth. I don't know, I said, and my voice cracked. I don't know if I'm doing anything properly anymore. She pulled up a stool and sat down, eye level with me. That small gesture, making herself equal to me instead of standing over me, that's what broke the dam. Everything came spilling out. The receipt. The changed passwords. The feeling that I was living with someone who was hiding things from me. The weight loss was because food tasted like ash in my mouth. The stress was because I lay awake every night next to a man I no longer trusted. The blood pressure was because my body was staging a rebellion against the lies I was trying to make myself believe. Dr. Chen listened without judgment. And when I finished, she handed me a tissue and said something that stuck with me. Stress doesn't just live in your head, it lives in your body. Those headaches you've been having, the fatigue, the chest pains you mentioned last visit, your body is trying to tell you something your mind doesn't want to hear. What do? I asked. And I felt like a child, lost and scared and looking for someone to tell me how to fix the unfixable. First, she said, you take care of yourself. Your health has to come first, Janet. Second, you find out the truth. Not knowing is eating you alive. It's literally making you sick. Whatever the truth is, it can't be worse than this limbo you're living in. She paused, seemed to consider her words carefully. And third, you make a plan. Don't confront him until you're ready. Don't give him time to hide things or prepare his defenses. Knowledge is power, and right now, you need all the power you can get. That's when it clicked. All those physical symptoms I'd been attributing to age or hormones or just life. They were manifestations of this toxic stress I'd been carrying. The weight of pretending everything was fine when nothing was fine. Studies show that 45% of people think financial infidelity is as serious as physical cheating. And sitting in that doctor's office, I understood why. Betrayal is betrayal, whether it happens in a bedroom or a bank account. Dr. Chen wrote me a prescription for anxiety medication just to help me through, and she gave me the number of a therapist. But more than that, she gave me permission to trust my instincts, to stop gaslighting myself, to believe that what I was feeling was valid and real and worth acting on. I drove home that afternoon in a daze, her words echoing in my head. When I got back to the house, Mark wasn't home yet. I stood in our bedroom, looking at our bed with its navy blue comforter that I'd picked out, the framed photos of our kids on the dresser, the life we'd built together. And I made a decision. I was going to find out the truth, whatever it was, even if it destroyed me. I started in his home office, a room I rarely entered because it was his space. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I felt like a criminal, going through my own husband's things, but what choice did I have? He certainly wasn't going to volunteer the information. The office smelled like him, coffee and cologne and old paper. His desk was neat, organized, everything in its place. Mark had always been meticulous about his workspace. It was one of the things I'd admired about him once. This ability to keep everything compartmentalized and controlled. Now that control felt sinister, like he was hiding things behind his perfect filing system and alphabetized bookshelves. I started with the desk drawers, hands shaking as I pulled them open. Pens and paper clips and sticky notes, a stapler, business cards rubber banded together, normal things, office things. I was beginning to think I wouldn't find anything when my fingers brushed against something in the back of the bottom drawer, behind a stack of old tax returns. The first thing I found was a credit card I didn't know existed. It was tucked in the back of his desk drawer, behind some old tax returns. The statements were there too, and when I started reading through them, my hands started shaking again. Charges at hotels, more expensive dinners, gifts from jewelry stores, jewelry I'd never received. The balances were staggering, tens of thousands of dollars I'd known nothing about. I spread the statements out on his desk, 6 months' worth of charges I'd never seen, never approved, never even known about. The Ritz-Carlton in Scottsdale, $463 for one night. The Phoenix Grand Hotel, $380. The boutique hotel downtown that advertised itself as romantic and intimate, $512. He'd been there 3 times in the last 6 months alone. And the jewelry. Oh God, the jewelry. Tiffany & Co. $800. Another charge at a boutique jeweler I'd never heard of, $1,200. A third purchase at some place called Adornments, $950. I looked down at my left hand, at the simple wedding band and engagement ring I'd worn for 23 years. The engagement ring had cost him $600 back then, and I'd treasured it. Now he was spending more than that on jewelry for someone else, multiple times. I sat down on the floor of his office because my legs wouldn't hold me anymore. The carpet smelled like his cologne, a scent that used to make me feel safe. Now it just made me nauseous. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was evidence. This was real. But it got worse. Oh God, it got so much worse. I found bank statements for an account in only his name. An account I'd never known about, funded with withdrawals from our joint savings, the savings we'd built together for retirement, for emergencies, for our future. He'd been systematically draining it for over 3 years. $30,000 gone, just gone. I traced the withdrawals with my finger, watching the pattern emerge. 2,000 here, 1,500 there, 3,000 the next month. Always different amounts, always labeled as something innocuous. Home repairs, or car maintenance, or business expenses. But they'd all gone into this secret account, and from there, they disappeared into hotels and dinners and jewelry for a woman I'd never met. $30,000. That was the down payment on a retirement condo we'd talked about. That was the emergency fund that was supposed to protect us if something went wrong. That was my security, my safety net, and he'd stolen it. Because that's what this was. Theft. Not a mistake, not a misunderstanding, not a forgivable lapse in judgment. Deliberate, calculated theft from his own wife. I kept digging, compelled by this horrible need to know everything. I found emails he'd printed out and hidden, discussions about failed business investments he'd never mentioned to me. He'd partnered with some guy named Travis on a commercial property deal that had gone belly up, and he'd lost close to $100,000, our money. Money we'd saved by skipping vacations and driving old cars and saying no to things we wanted. He'd gambled it away on some scheme, and he'd never said a word. The emails painted a picture I'd never seen before. Mark and Travis going in on a strip mall renovation project, confident they'd triple their investment. Plans for expansion, for building an empire, for becoming real players in the Phoenix commercial real estate market. And then the bottom had fallen out. The property had structural problems they hadn't anticipated. The permits had been denied. Their contractor had disappeared with $50,000. It was a comedy of errors, except there was nothing funny about it. And through it all, Mark had said nothing to me. He'd come home every night, kissed me on the cheek, complained about traffic and the heat, and pretended everything was fine. While our savings drained away and his secret debts piled up, he'd let me believe we were secure. He'd let me worry about whether we could afford new tires for my car while he was throwing away $100,000 investments without a word. The woman in the mirror that evening was someone I didn't recognize. I looked 10 years older than I had that morning. My face was blotchy from crying, my eyes swollen. I stood there, gripping the edge of the bathroom sink, and something inside me just broke. Or maybe it didn't break. Maybe it woke up. I'd reached my limit, my sacred line, and he'd crossed it so thoroughly there was no going back. For days, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I'd lie in bed next to him at night, this man who was snoring peacefully while I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing. How long had he been lying to me? Was there someone else? The jewelry purchases suggested yes, but I didn't have proof of that yet. Did it even matter? The financial betrayal alone was enough to end us. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning, my heart pounding, panic clawing at my chest. I'd slip out of bed and go downstairs, sitting at that kitchen table in the dark, running the numbers in my head. How much was left? What could I salvage? How was I going to survive this? At 52 years old, I was supposed to be planning retirement, not starting over from scratch. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to take those bank statements and throw them in his face and demand answers. But something stopped me. Call it instinct or survival mode or just sheer stubbornness. I decided I wasn't going to confront him until I was ready, until I had a plan, until I knew I could walk away and not end up destroyed. That's when my granddaughter Emma came over. She was 23, sharp as a tack, finishing her law degree at Arizona State. She'd stopped by to drop off some photographs she'd gotten developed. Yes, she still shoots film, says it's more authentic or whatever young people care about these days. She took one look at me and said, "Grandma, what's wrong?" I tried to brush it off. But Emma wasn't having it. She sat me down at that kitchen table and just waited. I've always loved that about her. She doesn't fill silence with chatter. She just sits with you in it until you're ready to talk. So I told her. Everything. The receipt, the credit card, the secret account, the failed investments. She listened without interrupting, and when I finished, her face was hard in a way I'd never seen before. "Grandma," she said, and her voice was steel, "you deserve better than this. You know that, right? You deserve so much better than this lying, cheating coward." Hearing her say it out loud did something to me. All the doubts I'd been having, all the ways I'd been second-guessing myself, she cut through all of it with her clarity. She helped me see that I wasn't crazy, wasn't overreacting, wasn't being dramatic. I was being betrayed, systematically and deliberately, by someone who'd promised to cherish me. "But what do I do?" I asked her, my voice small. "I don't even know where to start." Emma leaned forward, her eyes fierce. "You start by documenting everything, every statement, every receipt, every piece of evidence. You photograph it all. You make copies. You build a case so solid that he can't lie his way out of it." "I don't know if I can do this," I whispered. "I'm not like you. I'm not strong." "Grandma." Emma took my hands in hers. "You raised 2 kids basically by yourself while he built his career. You managed a household on whatever scraps he gave you. You've been strong this whole time. You just didn't know it. Now you're going to use that strength for yourself instead of for him." Emma helped me make a plan. She connected me with a friend of hers from law school who specialized in family law, a woman named Rebecca Stern, who had a reputation for being tough and thorough and not taking anyone's bullshit. Emma set up a consultation for me, went with me to the meeting, held my hand when I started crying while explaining everything to Rebecca. Rebecca was in her 40s, impeccably dressed, with kind eyes and a firm handshake. She listened to my story, looked over the documents I'd brought, and then she told me exactly what I needed to do. "First," Rebecca said, "you need to secure your own finances. Open an account in only your name at a different bank. Start diverting any income you have into that account. Second, you need to copy everything. I mean everything. Bank statements, credit card statements, tax returns, investment accounts, retirement accounts, the deed to your house, car titles, insurance policies. I want a complete picture of your marital assets." "He's going to notice," I said nervously. "If I start moving money, if I start copying things—" "Let him notice," Rebecca said firmly. "By the time he realizes what's happening, we'll be ready. You're not doing anything wrong, Janet. You're protecting yourself from someone who's been stealing from you. Don't let him make you feel guilty for defending yourself." Emma showed me how to start documenting everything. Photographs of the statements, copies of the emails, dates and times and amounts. She helped me understand my legal rights, what I was entitled to, how to protect myself financially. Having her there, this young woman who believed in me when I'd stopped believing in myself, It was like being handed a lifeline when I was drowning. We spent 3 days going through everything. Emma brought her laptop and created a spreadsheet, tracking every suspicious charge, every withdrawal from our joint account, every lie Mark had told. She was methodical and patient, never making me feel stupid for not seeing it sooner, never judging me for staying as long as I had. "You know what's crazy?" I said to her on the 3rd day. "I used to think I was lucky. I used to tell my friends how lucky I was to have a husband who handled all the financial stuff so I didn't have to worry about it. I actually thought that was a good thing." Emma looked up from the laptop. "It's not your fault, Grandma. He conditioned you to trust him. He deliberately kept you in the dark. That's on him, not you." I opened my own bank account that Mark didn't know about. Started diverting my Social Security checks into it instead of our joint account. I gathered copies of everything: deeds, titles, insurance policies, tax returns. I made a list of all our assets, everything we owned together. I was methodical about it, clinical even. It helped to treat it like a project, like something I was solving rather than something that was destroying me. The hardest part was pretending, going through the motions of normal life while knowing everything had changed. I'd make him dinner, and he'd complain if it wasn't exactly what he wanted. I'd do his laundry, fold his shirts the way he liked. I'd smile when he walked in the door, all while knowing I was planning my escape. But pretending got easier as I got angrier. Every time he complained about dinner, I thought about the $300 steaks he'd bought for someone else. Every time he asked me to iron his shirts, I thought about the secret bank account. Every time he touched me, I thought about the hotel rooms. The anger was clean and sharp, and it kept me focused. Research shows that 14% of people involved in financial betrayal also involve stealing money. I was living with someone who fit that statistic. He hadn't just hidden things from me. He'd actively stolen from our shared future. And the worst part? He was doing it all while acting like everything was fine. Like he was entitled to my labor and my loyalty while giving me nothing but lies in return. One night, about 6 weeks into my planning, we were sitting in the living room watching television. Some show I wasn't really paying attention to. Mark was on his phone, probably texting whoever he was buying that jewelry for. I looked at him sitting there, so comfortable in his deception, and I felt this surge of cold rage. Not hot anger, cold, calculated, precise. I'd spent weeks being sad, being confused, being hurt. Now I was just done. "Mark," I said casually, not taking my eyes off the television. "Do you remember our anniversary dinner at Dominic's? The year we celebrated 15 years? He looked up from his phone, confused. "What? Yeah, I guess. Why?" "I was just thinking about it. We should go back there sometime. It's been so long since we went anywhere nice." He shifted uncomfortably. "We can't afford places like that anymore, Jan. You know that." "Right," I said softly. "I forgot. Money's tight." He went back to his phone, oblivious to the fact that I'd just tested him and he'd failed. That I knew exactly how much he'd spent at Dominic's 2 weeks ago, knew exactly how not tight money really was, at least for his other life. I started testing him in small ways. I'd mention needing new tires for my car and watch him scramble to explain why we couldn't afford it, all while knowing he'd dropped $600 at some boutique hotel the week before. I'd suggest a modest dinner out, and he'd say we needed to save money. The hypocrisy was staggering. The audacity was almost impressive. Almost. I also started making some changes to my appearance. Nothing dramatic, just started wearing clothes I actually liked, instead of the practical, boring things I'd defaulted to for years. Started getting my hair done every few weeks. Emma noticed and commented on it. Said I looked more like myself than I had in ages. Mark didn't notice at all, which told me everything I needed to know about how much attention he was paying to me. One afternoon, I went shopping with my friend Linda, who'd been asking me for weeks to go out with her. I bought a dress, a real dress, not another pair of jeans and a sensible blouse. It was deep blue, fitted, elegant. The kind of dress that made me remember I was still a woman, still attractive, still worth something, "Janet," Linda said when I came out of the dressing room. "You look amazing. When are you going to wear this?" "I don't know," I said, looking at myself in the mirror. "Maybe nowhere. Maybe I just wanted to remember what it felt like to feel beautiful." Linda gave me a strange look. "Is everything okay with you and Mark?" I almost told her. The words were right there, pressing against my teeth, wanting to spill out, but I swallowed them down. "Everything's fine," I lied. "I just needed a change." The confrontation happened on a Tuesday. I'd planned it for a Tuesday because Tuesdays were when he usually worked from home. When I knew he'd be here and couldn't make excuses about meetings or appointments. I waited until the afternoon, until I knew I had his full attention. Then I set a folder on that kitchen table, the table that had seen so many dinners, so many conversations, so much life. This was where it would end. He looked at the folder, then at me, confused. "What's this?" I didn't sit down. I stood there, arms crossed, and said, "Open it." He reached for the folder slowly, like he knew something was wrong but couldn't quite figure out what. His fingers fumbled with the clasp. When he opened it and saw the first document, a copy of the secret credit card statement, his face went white. The look on his face when he saw what was inside. I'll remember that look for the rest of my life. The color drained out completely. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. All those credit card statements, bank records, printed emails, everything I'd found, everything he'd hidden. How did you... He couldn't even form a complete sentence. "How long, Mark?" My voice was steady, which surprised me. I'd practiced this moment in my head 100 times, and I'd always imagined myself crying or shouting. But I was calm, cold even. "How long have you been stealing from us? How long have you been lying to my face?" He stood up, the folder falling from his hands, papers scattering across the floor. "Janet, this isn't what it looks like. It looks like you've been running up secret credit cards while telling me we can't afford new tires. It looks like you've been staying in $400 hotel rooms while I'm clipping coupons. It looks like you've stolen $30,000 from our retirement savings while I'm wearing the same clothes I bought 5 years ago because you said money was tight." He tried the usual tactics. First, denial. Those weren't what I thought they were. I was misunderstanding. There were explanations for everything. "Those charges are for business, Jan. I was entertaining clients. The hotels were for work trips. You don't understand how business works." "Then explain it to me," I said quietly. "Explain why you're buying jewelry that I never receive. Explain the withdrawals from our savings that you never mentioned. Explain Travis and the $100,000 you lost on a deal you never told me about." His face went even paler at the mention of Travis. "You went through my private files? You invaded my privacy? Your privacy?" My voice rose for the first time. "Your privacy? You forfeited your privacy when you started stealing from our joint accounts, when you started lying about where our money was going, when you broke every promise you made to me." When that didn't work, he tried minimizing. It wasn't that much money, he'd been planning to tell me. He was going to pay it all back. "Look, I made some bad investments. I didn't want to worry you. I was going to fix it before you even knew there was a problem. I was protecting you." "Protecting me? By draining our savings? By running up tens of thousands in secret debt? That's not protection, Mark. That's betrayal." Then came the gaslighting. I was being paranoid. I was overreacting. I was making something out of nothing. "You're blowing this all out of proportion. Lots of couples have separate accounts. Lots of husbands handle the finances without consulting their wives on every little thing. You're acting like I committed some crime?" "You did commit a crime," I said, my voice like ice. "It's called theft. It's called fraud. And I have every receipt, every statement, every withdrawal documented. Rebecca Stern is my lawyer now, and she says I have more than enough to prove financial abuse." His face went through a series of emotions so fast I could barely track them. Shock at hearing I'd hired a lawyer. Fear when he heard Rebecca's name, even he knew her reputation. Anger that I'd gone behind his back. You hired Rebecca Stern, that barracuda. Janet, what the hell are you thinking? We can work this out. We don't need lawyers getting involved. And finally, when nothing else worked, he tried blame. If I'd been more supportive of his business ventures, if I'd understood the pressure he was under, if I'd been a better wife. This is partly your fault, you know. If you'd been more interested in what I was doing, if you'd supported my business instead of just nagging about money all the time, maybe I wouldn't have had to keep things from you. Maybe if you'd been more what? I stepped closer to him, and he actually backed up. More blind? More stupid? More willing to let you steal from me? What exactly should I have done differently, Mark? What could I have done that would have made you an honest man? That last one almost made me laugh. A better wife. I'd given him everything, sacrificed everything, and I hadn't been good enough. The sheer delusion was remarkable. I let him talk himself out. Let him cycle through all his excuses and justifications and attempts to manipulate me. When he finally ran out of words, I said, "I've already spoken to a lawyer. I'm filing for legal separation. You're going to repay every cent you stole from our savings, or I'm going to make sure the court orders it. You're going to move out of this house by the end of the week, or I'm going to get a restraining order. And if you try to hide or move any more assets, I will have no problem making all of this very, very public." His face went through so many emotions I couldn't track them all. Shock, anger, fear. He tried to grab my hand and I pulled away. "You can't do this," he said, and his voice cracked. "We can work this out. I'll fix it. I'll fix everything. Just give me a chance." "You can't fix this, Mark. You can't unsteal that money. You can't unlie for 3 years. You broke something that can't be repaired, and I'm done trying to hold together something you've already destroyed." "Janet, please!" He was actually crying now, tears streaming down his face. "I love you. I made mistakes, but I love you. Don't throw away 23 years over some money. We can recover from this. I'll go to counseling. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't give up on us." You gave up on us when you made your first withdrawal from our savings and didn't tell me. You gave up on us when you stayed in that first hotel room. You gave up on us every single day for 3 years while you lied to my face. This isn't me giving up, Mark. This is me finally accepting that you gave up a long time ago. That's when he called the police. Can you believe that? He actually called the police on me, claimed I was threatening him, that I was being irrational. The officers who showed up were professional, but clearly uncomfortable. They listened to both of us, looked at the documentation I showed them, and eventually suggested we handle it through the courts like adults. One of the officers, a woman named Officer Martinez, pulled me aside while her partner talked to Mark. "Ma'am," she said quietly, "I've seen this before. Financial abuse is real, and what you're describing sounds serious. You did the right thing getting a lawyer, and you have the right to ask him to leave. This is your home, too." "He called you on me," I said, still shocked. "He's the one who stole from me, and he called the police on me." "Abusers often do that," she said gently. "They try to make themselves the victim. Don't let him flip the script on you. You know the truth, your lawyer knows the truth, and now we know the truth too." She handed me her card. "If he tries anything, if he threatens you, if he harasses you, if he tries to stop you from leaving or accessing your accounts, you call me directly, okay?" They didn't arrest anyone, but the humiliation on Mark's face as they left, that felt like a small victory. The next few weeks were a blur of lawyers and paperwork and difficult conversations. Our adult children took it hard, tried to understand why their parents were splitting up after so long. I showed them the evidence, explained everything as calmly as I could. My son was furious on my behalf. My daughter cried, but said she understood. They'd both noticed something was off, they admitted, but they'd hoped I was imagining things. "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" my daughter asked, her voice thick with tears. "Because I was ashamed," I admitted. "Because I didn't want you to think less of your father. Because I kept hoping I was wrong. Because—" I trailed off, looking at my children's faces. Because I didn't want to admit that I'd wasted 23 years on someone who didn't respect me. "You didn't waste anything, Mom," my son said fiercely. "You have us. You have Emma. You have a whole life beyond him. Don't let him take that away from you, too." The court ordered Mark to repay the $30,000 he'd taken from our savings, plus pay my legal fees. He lost his claim to half the house because of the proven financial infidelity. The judge wasn't sympathetic to his excuses, and I watched him realize he wasn't going to charm his way out of this one. For the first time in our marriage, there were real consequences for his actions. External justice came, but it was hollow in a way I hadn't expected. I thought I'd feel vindicated, triumphant even. Instead, I just felt tired. Tired and sad and oddly empty. 23 years of marriage, and this is how it ended. In a courtroom, with lawyers and judges and cold legal terminology. There was no closure, no dramatic moment of him realizing what he'd lost. He was just gone, and I was alone. Except I wasn't alone. Emma was there, and so were my kids, and my friends who'd rallied around me when they learned what had happened. My sister flew in from Seattle and stayed for 2 weeks, just being present, helping me sort through decades of accumulated life. It was her who suggested I start writing again. "You always talked about wanting to write," she said. "Maybe now's the time." I started small, just journal entries at first, processing everything that had happened. Then short pieces about the things I noticed in my daily life, the way the light hit the desert in the morning, the sound of birds in the mesquite trees, the small kindnesses of strangers. Writing felt like coming home to a part of myself I'd abandoned. Every word I put on paper was an act of reclamation. I pulled those old notebooks out of the garage, the ones from college with my poems and stories. I read them with tears streaming down my face, mourning the girl who'd written them, but also celebrating her. She'd still been in there all along, waiting for me to remember her. I also started taking control of my finances in a way I never had before. I educated myself on investments, retirement planning, budgeting. I met with a financial advisor Emma recommended, and together we created a plan to rebuild my security. It felt empowering, understanding money and what to do with it instead of just trusting someone else to handle it. The advisor, a woman named Karen, who was probably my age, looked at my situation and said, "You know what's amazing? Most women in your situation would be completely lost. But you documented everything, protected yourself, and came out with your house and your savings intact. That takes intelligence and courage." I didn't feel very courageous, I admitted. "Courage isn't the absence of fear," Karen said. "It's acting despite the fear, and that's exactly what you did." Slowly, over months, I started to feel like myself again. Not the person I'd been before Mark, but someone new. Someone harder, maybe, but also stronger. Someone who knew her worth and wouldn't settle for less than she deserved. I redecorated the house, got rid of things that reminded me of him, made it mine. I joined a writing group at the local library. I started volunteering at a women's shelter, helping other women who were dealing with their own betrayals. The writing group became one of my safe havens. Every Thursday evening, I'd sit in a circle with 6 other women, sharing our stories and our words. Some of them were published authors, others were just beginning like me. But we all understood that writing was more than just putting words on paper. It was excavating truth, processing pain, finding beauty in the aftermath of loss. I wrote about the desert, about resilience, about the strength it takes to walk away from something you've invested decades in. And they listened, and they understood, and they encouraged me to keep going. The volunteering at the women's shelter opened my eyes to how common my story was. I met women in their 20s just starting out, women my age starting over, women in their 70s who'd finally found the courage to leave. Financial abuse, emotional manipulation, gaslighting. These weren't rare occurrences. They were epidemic. And sitting with these women, sharing my story and hearing theirs, I realized that my experience could help others. that the pain I'd been through had given me a unique ability to recognize it in others and offer genuine understanding. The house felt different without him in it, lighter somehow. I could breathe deeper. I didn't have to walk on eggshells anymore, didn't have to wonder what mood he'd be in or what I'd done wrong. I was free, and that freedom was intoxicating. One evening, about 6 months after everything fell apart, I was sitting on my back porch watching the sunset. The Arizona sky was doing that thing it does, where it turns every shade of pink and orange and purple all at once. I had a glass of wine in my hand and my journal in my lap, and for the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt peaceful. Not happy exactly, I wasn't there yet, but peaceful, content, like maybe everything was going to be okay after all. Emma called while I was sitting there, just to check in. She did that a lot, my sweet granddaughter, making sure I was doing all right. We talked about her classes, her boyfriend, the trip she was planning for spring break, normal things, good things. Before we hung up, she said, "I'm proud of you, Grandma. You're the strongest person I know." I cried a little after that call. Good tears, though, healing tears. I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, frozen in front of that mirror, feeling like her whole world had ended. I wanted to tell her that she was going to be okay. Better than okay. I wanted to tell her that the ending she feared was actually a beginning. Now, before I wrap this up, I need to share something important with you, something I learned through all of this that might help you or someone you love. Prevention for the future starts with awareness and boundaries. Nobody thinks financial betrayal will happen to them until it does. Here are some things I wish I'd known, things that might protect you. First, never give up complete financial control to your partner, no matter how much you trust them. Always have access to all accounts. Know where your money is and where it's going. Joint accounts are fine, but maintain at least one account in only your name. It's not about mistrust, it's about self-preservation. Second, pay attention to the red flags. Secretive behavior around money, changes in spending patterns, suddenly becoming protective of phones or computers, reluctance to discuss finances. These are all warning signs. Trust your instincts. If something feels off, investigate. Don't let anyone gaslight you into ignoring your gut. Third, understand your legal rights and your financial situation. Know what assets you have, what debts exist, what you're entitled to. Keep copies of important documents in a place your partner can't access. If you're starting to feel uncomfortable, talk to a lawyer before things escalate. Knowledge is power, and in situations like mine, it's also protection. Fourth, build a support system outside your marriage. Friends, family, professionals, people who see you as an individual, not just as someone's partner. These are the people who'll help you see clearly when you're too close to the situation. They're your lifeline when everything falls apart. And finally, never sacrifice so much of yourself that there's nothing left if the relationship ends. Keep your own interests, your own dreams, your own identity. Don't make your partner's life more important than your own. A healthy relationship should add to your life, not replace it. I learned all of this the hard way, and I'm sharing it so maybe you won't have to. Financial infidelity is real, it's damaging, and it's more common than most people realize. But it's also survivable. You can come back from it. You can rebuild. You can thrive. Thank you for staying with me until the end of this story. I know it was long, and I know parts of it were hard to hear. But I needed to tell it, and maybe you needed to hear it. If you're going through something similar, please know you're not alone. Please know it's not your fault. Please know you deserve better. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is there as you hear this. Drop a comment and let me know. It helps me feel connected to all of you out there. And if this story resonated with you, if it made you feel something or taught you something or just kept you company for a while, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. It really does help. Leave a comment telling me what you would have done in my place. would you have confronted him immediately? Would you have planned like I did? Or would you have done something completely different? I'm genuinely curious to hear your thoughts. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like this one, stories of survival and strength and women reclaiming their lives. And stick around for the next videos. I think you'll find them.